Just to note that the play starts at about 12 o'clock. The scene we're doing now takes place 2 o'clock, 2 a.m. And just think, she was whisked away perhaps at 10 o'clock. So 4 hours. And think what happens between the time that she leaves the Rancho and the end of the scene, not the beginning of the scene. At the end of the scene, when he's off to Cyprus and she's going to go, the marriage has been approved. Just to be aware, it's very important because it's going to determine how people respond to this scene, especially Desdemona, in terms of what's happened over a short period of time. Okay, any questions before we start the scene about some things prior to it that led up to it? In terms of, I'm talking in terms of the view.
It's the part of it's the door.
Maggie, I'll have you start. If you would start with the view.
Okay.
And Artemis, if you would read the first senator. There may be a line from one of the others. If there is, he can pick that up. He would anyway. I think there's another senator. There are a couple of others on, but they don't say anything. If there's there's another line or two. But, you're how you doing?
Fine, how are you? Sorry,
And Mark, if you would read in just for the opening scene, the opening part of the scene, the messenger, and we'll go slowly, taking a few speeches at a time, and we'll break it down.
Okay.
We'll get through the whole scene, and then we'll go back, and then we'll go back again. Again, any questions about the scene to start with?
when I left, the other day, there wasn't much left, but did you go over it, and can I get those notes from somebody? That's really the only thing. I get them, I guess, from you, and whatever we left off on.
Okay, if there's anything, when we're through, I'll go back to that for sure. Yeah, I don't think there was really much. We did it a couple of times more.
Just a question, you want me to do messenger, sailor, officer?
Yeah. So at the opening of the scene, we could say that they're studying a large map of the area. And perhaps on the map we could indicate where the ships are, and in regard to the dispatches that are coming in. And perhaps they're moving them around to see where the Turkish fleet is at this particular time. What we don't want there is pronouncement. We don't want the news to come out in terms of the audience. What we want is them trying to figure out what the plan is, what the Turks are doing. In other words, are they going to Cyprus? Are they going to Rhodes? So it's deep, studied, thoughtful attempt to evaluate what's happening.
And have they been in this meeting for like 3 or 4 hours
Absolutely.
already themselves, looking for Othello, doing whatever? They've kind of been going along, like maybe even before 10 o'clock.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And they've been waiting for him. They haven't been able to contact him.
Yeah.
The thing is, at the end of the scene, he's ready to leave in an hour. So they've got to have someone go. If he doesn't come, if they can't locate him in another hour or two, someone else is going to have to go instead. They have no generals. He's the best. He's the one they want to go. But if it has to be, it will be another person. Yeah. They sent men out to find others who they're interested in, and we're going to see. But they can't wait on him much longer. Time is of the essence. They're not confused. They're not bewildered. They're analyzing the situation. These are intelligent men. This is the man who runs the country and the Senate. And they're trying to figure out what is happening here. And they have a pretty good idea of what actually is happening, but they're not sure. And so they're putting the pieces together. Okay, let's take a look. Let's start from the top. I'll stop you as we go along.
There is no composition in these news that gives them credit.
Indeed, they are disproportionate. My letters say 107 galleys.
And mine, 140.
and mine 200, though they jump not on a just account. As in these cases where the aims report, 'tis oft with difference. Yet they do all confirm a Turkish fleet, and bearing up to Cyprus.
Nay, it is possible enough to judgment. Nay, it is possible enough to judgment. I do not so secure me in the air. But the main article I do approve in fearful sense.
What ho! What ho! What ho! A messenger from the galleys.
Now, what's the business?
Turkish preparation makes for rows, so I was bid report here to the state by Signor Angelo.
How say you by this charge?
This cannot be, by no assay of reason. 'Tis a pageant to keep us in false gaze. When we consider the importancy of Cyprus to the Turk, and let ourselves again but understand that as it is more concerns the Turk than Rhodes, so may he with more facile question bear it. For though it stands not in such warlike embrace, but altogether lacks the abilities that Rhodes is dressed in, if we make thought of this, we must not think the Turk is so unskillful to leave that latest, which concerns him first, neglecting an attempt of ease and gain, to wake and wage a danger profitless.
Nay, in all confidence, he's not for Rhodes.
Here's more news.
Okay, we'll stop there. That's fine. Okay, so at the beginning, it's deep, studied, no pronouncement. They're completely involved in what's happening on the board. Okay, we'll say that we have the board here on this table, and they're looking at it. It's the layout of where the area is, where all this is happening. Ships are going and moving things around. This is all going to determine the timing and how the speeches are delivered. And no matter what happens in this area, they remove the fat, the excess, the two of them, and they're able to slice away this veneer and see what's happening, and they zero in even before they get the last report, which confirms the fact they own the Cyprus, the Turks. So we get a sense of the leaders. We get a sense of their intelligence, their ability. Very important. Sets the stage for what's going to happen in this scene. Great urgency. Within 2 years, they'll have taken the parenthesis, as in these cases where the aim reports dissolved with difference. I do not so secure me in the error, but the main article I do approve in fearful sense. Tie that all together. There should be no break there. Let that be a wrong out. Now remember, again, I know I've said this before about run-ons. Often it depends on the actor, the interpretation of a particular line or whatever. What I'm doing is I'm making choices now that can be correct, certainly, but that also will illuminate what's happening there in terms of the line. And then later on, from that, you might go to where it isn't a run-on. A line like that could conceivably be broken up. There are areas where I feel it definitely should be a run-on, and then there are areas where I feel there should not. But there are any number of areas where it's arbitrary. It depends on how the line is delivered, but either one can be intelligent. So I don't want you to think it's necessarily carved in rock. I'm looking for a rhythm now that will establish the clarity of the line as best as possible, and those are what my choices are determined by now. Okay, I'll mention a few optional ones. He says, this cannot be by no essay of reason. Now you can have a break there. This cannot be. This cannot be by no essay of reason.
Where is that?
19. Line 19. That could also be a run-on. If it's a run-on, it's just this cannot be by no essay of reason. And you make the point either way. And there are a few like that I will go into in terms of optional because there's no loss either way. Now, the next three lines will tie together. 'Tis a pageant to keep us in false gaze. The break is after gaze. Then, he says, when we consider the importance of Cyprus to the Turk, there's a break there. Now you have in parenthesis, you have 3 lines, and let ourselves again but understand that as it more concerns the Turk than Rhodes, so may he with more facile question bear it. But he continues the parenthesis, for that it stands not in such warlike grace, but altogether lacks the abilities that Rhodes is dressed in. That's a tough one. What you've got to avoid there is coming to an end early. In other words, and let ourselves again but understand, that as it more concerns the Turk than Rhodes, so may he with more facile question bear it. End of statement, but not end of parenthesis. So you have a problem there. Because if you end it like that, and you're still in the parenthesis, then the next line, for that it stands not in such warlike grace, is going to come out of the parenthesis. It won't make any sense. So what you're going to have to do there is build it steadily, and then the last line has to be the payoff. And let ourselves again but understand that as it more concerns the Turk than Rhodes, so may he with more facile question bear it. For that it stands not, there's that break, but there's a continuous build. For that it stands not in such warlike grace, but altogether lacks the abilities that Rhodes is dressed in. End of parenthesis, and then we go back to the end of the original thought. If we make thought of this, so the key area in the parenthesis is for that it stands not in such warlike grace. That's the payoff line. It can't be earlier. If it is, then you've broken the parenthesis, and we're going to get into another interpretation. And it won't work, because then the parenthesis won't go into the next line properly. We'll go back over this.
So in a rehearsal situation, would you have the actors leave that whole parenthesis out for a while till they get how the two lines connect?
No, it's too long.
It's too long.
It's too long. By the time you get out of it, it's not an exact continuation of what you started with. It is more or less, but it isn't the exact flavor.
Okay, so it's not. It's really not like the other parentheses things. Okay.
But it can be a real trap of parentheses.
Yeah.
You can drown in it. There's got to be that. Usually the problems in longer ones is that there seems to be a payoff line earlier, prior to the ending. And then the last line of it is like anticlimactic, and then it's gone. The whole point of it is gone. Now, after all this, he says, if we make thought of this, there's a break there. We must not think the Turk is so unskillful to leave that latest, which concerns him first. We have an antithesis there. Remember what I said about antithesis. It doesn't always have to be compounded. It doesn't have to be highlighted, but I want you to be aware of it because it's an opportunity to color lines, flavor. You're going to need as much of that as possible when you're working on the classics. So any area where you see, that's the reason for this. That's why I mention it all the time. There'll be a few that we may have missed.
What's the antithesis here? Latest first? To leave that latest?
Yes, which concerns him first. And even on the next one, there's another one. Neglecting an attempt at ease and gain to wage and wage a danger profits.
Yeah.
Opposites. We need colors, highlights, variations. And there's many ways to do the antithesis, highlighting the lines. There's many different ways to do it. It's not an analytical thing. I don't want it to be approached that way, because that would be awful. Then you're just reading poetry the way they do in schools. That's not at all what we're heading through. Yeah. Okay, let's go back one more time.
Sometimes they keep it 55
Excuse me?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, here's another optional. I want to mention a few optional lines now, optional choices. We must not think the Turk is so unskillful, and that we have a run-on here to leave that latest, which concerns him first. And that could be a run-on, or it could not. It could also be, you could also have a break there. You must not think the Turk is so unskillful, and then to leave that latest, just that moment there. So, again, I want you to be aware of variations, alternatives. Let's go back. Let's take a look at it again. Monica, if you would read the first and second. No, I'm sorry, Monica. Read the first sentence. Artemis, if you would read the officer and the sailor. Okay?
And messenger?
Please. Let's take a look.
There is no composition in these news that gives them credit to.
There are disproportions. My letters say 107 galleys.
And mine 140.
And mine 200.
Hey, and mine 200. But though they jump not on just account, as in these cases where the aim points 'tis often differs, yet they do all confirm a Turkish fleet and bearing to Cyprus.
Nay, it is possible enough to judge it. I do not so secure me in the error, but the main article I do approve in fearful sense.
What ho! What ho! What ho! A messenger from the galleys.
Now, what's the business?
The Turkish preparation makes for roads. So I bid report here to the state by Signor Angelo.
How say you by this change? In all confidence, he's not for roads.
Here is more news. The Ottomites, reverend and gracious, steering with due course towards the Isle of Rhodes, have there enjointed them with an after fleet
So I thought. How many is this?
of 30 sail, and now they do restem their backward course, bearing with frank appearance their purposes towards Cyprus. Signor Montano, your trusty and most valiant servitor, with his free duty recommends you thus, and prays you to believe him.
'Tis certain then for Cyprus. Marcus, is it Lucisos? Lucisos?
Lucisos, yeah.
Marcus Lucisos. Is not he in town?
He's now in Florence.
Write from us to him. Post haste. Dispatch.
Okay, good. This is a very tough area, by the way, so you know.
Why is he even mentioned? He's never brought up again in the play.
That's a good point. It's interesting. He does that sometimes, Shakespeare. He'll, in the middle of a scene like this, he'll throw in a name of somebody who you never see again. We have to use this. Yeah, it is an inside joke. No. I wasn't there. We have to use it. What I'm doing with that is saying that he's looking for someone else. In other words, he has to go out in an hour. So he says at the end of the scene, he says, you have to leave tonight, meaning now. When I say tonight, it's a.m. now. He's talking about this night. So obviously, if he can't locate him in another hour or two, as I said earlier, someone else, he'll go. And he's in Florence, but so we'll wait a few hours. We'll get him here, or we'll get someone else. Maybe they'll go on the next ship. Maybe they'll send another general before him. See? So it has a meaning. It isn't. They've also debated about this in scholars, pages about who this guy is, and they located a name in one text of somebody who had a name similar to that, and it tied in with his life story. It had nothing whatever to do with the play at all. But I mention that only to show how they get lost in minutiae, which has nothing to do with the play. So again, at the opening of the scene, they know what's happening, but they're confused by what is going on outside what appears to be. Okay, so they're trying to put the pieces together exactly, but they're prepared to send the people to Cyprus. That's the plan. That's where they're headed. That's where the Turks are going to invade. It doesn't make sense for them to invade Rhodes. There's no logic to it. Rhodes is fortified, and Cyprus is not. So, but they're trying to understand what is happening here. But all this fact they're removing. They're never at any point fooled by what's going on. It isn't like a revelation at the end when he comes in and says they're heading to Cyprus after all. The atmosphere, the opening of the scene is anticipation, urgency, anticipation, hopefully, of the arrival of Othello, and also the arrival of further news as to what's happening now. They're waiting for the final reports. That will tell the story. Okay, let's do that one more time, and then we'll continue into. And take your time here, just so you get more of the atmosphere of what's going on here. Very thoughtful. They're talking inwardly. This is not going on. They're not even talking to the others in the room. Each one is studying and trying to pinpoint what's going on here and trying to figure it out. So there's no pontification. There's no announcement. There's no pronouncement at all here. They're lost on the board. Looking at that board, there are the ships. There are the Turk ships where they were last spotted, and they're moving them around. They're trying to figure out what is happening here. There is a method in this madness. They don't know what it is yet, but they're zeroing in. Thoughtful, deep, studied. Okay.
There is no composition in these news that gives them credit.
Indeed. There are disproportions. My letters say 107 gallons.
And mine 140.
And mine 200. But though they jump not on just account, as in these cases where the aim enforced his oath of difference. Yet they do all confirm a Turkish fleet in bearing up to Cyprus.
Nay, it is possible enough to judgment. I do not so secure me in the error, but the main article I do approve in fearful sense.
What ho! What ho! What ho! A messenger from the galleys.
Now, what's the business?
The Turkish preparation makes for roads. So I was bid report here to the state by Signor Angelo.
How say you by this change?
This cannot be. I know a state of reason. It is a pageant to keep us in false gaze. Let ourselves again but understand the really thought of this.
Nay, in all confidence, he's not for roads.
Here is more news. The Ottomites, reverend and gracious, steering with due course towards the Isle of Rhodes, have there enjoined them with an after fleet.
Aye, so I thought. How many is you this?
Of 30 sail, and now they do bestem their backward course, bearing with frank appearance their purposes towards Cyprus. Signor Montano, your trusty and most valiant servitor, with his free duty recommends you thus, and prays you to believe him.
'Tis certain then for Cyprus. Marcus Lucisus, is not he in town?
Is now in Florence.
Write from us to him, post haste. Dispatch.
Okay, so when he knows for sure what their plan is and what they have to do, that's when he calls for them.
Right.
Okay, so it's almost an answer to what Mark was asking about who this guy is.
Right.
It's when his name is, as soon as he knows they're heading to Cyprus, there's no question, okay, now we have to move on.
Right.
And if they had known a few hours ago, they might not be waiting for Othello now. In that speech, Monica, that long speech the first senator has, just be aware that color by reason, pageant, false gaze. I'm mentioning key words here. At the end, the last 3 lines, to leave that latest, which concerns him first.
Right.
And neglecting an attempt at ease and gain, another idea, to wait and wage a danger profitless. Okay. Now, the next line, by the way, is cut. There's not too much I cut out of the play right now. I don't believe most. But the line does not work. Here comes Babancho without more, and then he apparently does not see him. He talks to Othello, and then all of a sudden he recognizes that he's there. There's no, doesn't work on the stage at all. So it goes right to Othello comes in with the others, of course, Babancho, Cassio, Rodrigo, Iago, and he has the first two words there about Othello. There's a break there, a brief break, and then he must straight employ against the general and the art. Now we have here elisions, the thing we talked about last week in terms, and I mentioned it earlier, about cutting down words. It may seem strange now, but you'll get used to it and you will appreciate, believe me. And he won't say against the general enemy Ottoman. He will say against the general enemy Ottoman. Now, because there's an urgency here, people just don't talk that way. So Shakespeare, for all his highfalutin reputation, writes very natural dialogue. And but we have to be aware of it. He's not always going to tell us the amount of syllables. Though I mentioned before, there's usually 10 in a line. But here's another example. So it's against the general enemy Ottoman. I did not see you as cut. Of course, we'll go right to welcome, gentle.
I missed your point there. I'm sorry. I'm trying to be I've been going back to that.
Okay.
It's the general enemy Ottoman.
General enemy Ottoman. 2 syllables on each of those 2 words before Ottoman. There's urgency here. There's no time for, stretching out words. And this is what we do in real life.
General, it's general. Instead of pronouncing general,
Yeah.
it's general. Instead of
Drop
pronouncing
the
enemy,
E.
it's just enemy. Drop the E.
Okay.
Or sometimes it's
No, I understand.
Oh, you
Why?
just said, okay. I wonder if you had
Well, why are we doing that?
We're doing it because it works better in terms of the language. the sound. It works better in terms of the psychology because they wouldn't compound, they wouldn't pronounce the word when there's such urgency involved. You know what I'm saying? In other words, it's something that we all do in real life.
Wouldn't that apply to every single word in this whole section here?
When you have alternatives, yeah.
Urgency.
Yeah, you won't have that many alternatives, so you won't have that many opportunities to do that.
Okay.
Everyone we have, I'll mention. If you see a few I don't mention, by all means. He mentions again, Brabantio does in the next speech. He also, doth the general care take hold on me. Now, for example, for my particular grief, there's no way to cut that down without it being just bad grammar. But there are words, or bearer.
Where's that word?
It's at the bottom. It's a so floodgate or bearer. Don't worry about this now. I just want you to be aware of it. I mean, if you put in the extra syllable, it's not going to bother me. But after a while, as you get more familiar with what's happening there and the urgency of the particular situation, it'll happen easily, automatically.
Do you know, speaking it in my mouth, it sort of makes me feel awkward. General makes me feel as if I'm garbling.
Right.
And speaking quickly, I would naturally say general enemy.
Sure.
But I might say general enemy.
Right.
Or general enemy. But I don't, those two words together back to back make me feel very awkward.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Oh, no, it doesn't matter. It's not a rule that's, there are times even when you can have urgency in a scene,
Right.
and the character, like say Iago, is purposely, within that urgency, is going to enunciate.
Right.
He can use it that way to make a point. So there are so many possibilities. I just want you to be aware that often it can work, and it will help. It'll make it easier, the line. But certainly, if it's awkward and uncomfortable, it's counterproductive. But you will find most often to the ear, it's going to sound better. Okay. Any question about what we just did and what we're going into now, this area with Brabantio and Othello, up until Iago leaves to get Desdemona? That's the next area. Oh, okay.
Brabantio, is he really?
He's the father of Desdemona.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is he just a person in the court?
He's a senator, and he's of high rank, but he wasn't called tonight. There was urgency. They didn't really need him. He's important, but they can do what they have to do without him, And it's awkward when he comes in because they really should have called him, and it would have been the right thing. Because he's not here for that reason. He's here because of Othello marrying his daughter. Okay. Now, when we go into the next area, Mark, if you would read Othello. Monica, excuse me, your first name,
You can call me Rue.
Oh, it's
Ruth Ann, but I'm
it's
using
Rue. Was it Ruth or Rue? It's Rue. And okay, let's take a look at it. We'll talk about it as we go through it. And if you want to stop as we go along, please. There's a question on a particular level time, and I'd rather get into it then than after the scene's over. Okay, let's start with the Duke's line.
And who's Othello?
Mark.
Valiant Othello, we must straight implore you against the general enemy, Ottoman. Is he right?
Yes.
Welcome, gentle Signor. We lacked your counsel and your help tonight. So did I yours. Good, your good grace. Good, your grace.
Okay, have a break after yours. Brief, just a break there. Good.
So did I yours. Good, your grace. Pardon me. Neither my place nor aught I have heard of business hath raised me from my bed, nor doth the general care take hold on me. For my particular grief is of so floodgate and o'erbearing nature that it engulfs and swallows other sorrows, and it is still itself.
Okay, that it engluts. Swallows other sorrows. Okay, let's break that up a little bit. So, valiant Othello, and there's a break there a moment, so not to be rude and tell him he's right going off to Cyprus, he greets him. There's a greeting there in the first two words. And then it continues. It's just the slightest break. And then he goes right into why he called him, rather than telling him why he called him as he greets him. So we can get warmth in there, we can get cordiality in there, and we can also we can go almost right into the next line. But there's got to be, so when I say a break, I'm putting in breaks just to make you aware of colors, as well as understanding of the line. So did I yours. Okay, now, it's a little awkward here for Brabantio to come in like this. That's what's happening. There's a break after pardon me, a brief break. The next two lines tie together. Neither my place, there'll be a run on there, nor aught I heard of business had raised me from my bed. Nor doth the general care take hold on me. There's a run on there. And there's a break after hold on me. For my particular grief is of so floodgate and overbearing nature, a break, that it engluts and swallows other sorrows. And there's a run on here. And yet, not yet, and yet is still itself.
Not yet.
No. Yet will be better. Keep one thing in mind with Brabantio as we do this scene. This is the last time he's on stage. The next time we hear about him is dead. When Lodovico comes and at the end of the play, and Graziano, and they mention the fact that he died of a broken heart. We've got to see that in the scene. And that should clue you into what's happening with him in terms of the actor, in terms of the character. He's not just a ranting, angry father. He's a man truly who is on the verge of a breakdown here. But there's a lot of possibilities here right now. Let's go back.
That and Othello. We must straight employ you against the general enemy, Othello. I did not see you welcome, gentle signor. We lacked your counsel and your help tonight.
So did I yours. Good your grace, pardon me. Neither my place nor aught I heard of business hath raised me from my bed, nor doth the general care take hold of me. Right, can I do that again?
Sure, please.
So did I yours. Good your grace, pardon me. Neither my place nor aught I heard of business hath raised me from my bed, nor doth the general care take hold of me. For my particular grief is of so floodgate and overbearing nature that it engluts and swallows other sorrows, and yet is still itself.
Why? What's the matter?
My daughter. Oh, my daughter.
Dead?
To me. She is abused, stolen from me, and corrupted by spells and medicines bought of mountebanks. For nature so preposterously to err, being not deficient, blind, or lame of sense, sans witchcraft could not.
Okay, good. Let's go back.
I have a question. What is this still in here? And yet is still itself. I don't understand that.
In other words, it does not change. In spite of what he just said that has happened, it still doesn't change. It's still there, the feeling.
Okay.
It still exists.
Okay.
It's not in any way ameliorated. Yet is an optional reading. It doesn't change the meaning, but I think it's a better reading than it. So
I just didn't understand the line at all.
Sure. And of course, what he's saying here, too, is he's apologizing because the country's in danger.
Right, yeah.
And he realizes that's more important than my daughter.
Right.
He realizes it, but he doesn't feel that.
Right.
He's saying my feelings, in spite of what I know to be, we're dealing with the whole country here, I can't help it.
Yeah.
This is, in fact,
Still
more important to me than
to
anything
me,
else. It's very honest here. And, okay. My daughter, oh, my daughter. He comes right in with dead. And his response comes right back with I to me. And then there's a break there, and he explains what happened. Highlight for now the descriptions: abused, stolen, corrupted. And what by? By spells, medicines. And the end. Sans witchcraft could not. Without witchcraft it could not be.
Is that how you say mountebanks?
Mountebanks
Mountebanks?
Mountebanks.
and sons witchcraft. Without witchcraft, could not be.
And what are mountebanks?
People who sell charms and illegal drugs and who deal in all kinds of chicanery.
Like a charlatan, almost?
You got it. Okay, and again, remembering that
Would you drop the E in this preposterously, so preposterously instead of for pronunciation?
possibly, yeah, if it's comfortable, absolutely. It's not illiterate. There are times when you drop the syllable and it just sounds wrong. You know what I mean? It sounds ignorant, but that's not what we're talking about. Because the characters we're talking about here in the scene certainly would not speak that way. But again, there's certainly this urgency here, yeah. And again, I didn't mark everything, all of it, but the ones that you see yourself for sure. A break after, for nature so preposterously to her, being not deficient, blind, or lame of sense. And then another slight break.
Now he's talking about her there, right? That
Yes.
she's not deficient.
In other words, it cannot be
Right.
unless she was worked upon.
How would we pronounce what we do?
Er.
Or air?
Like UH, yeah.
UH.
Sure. Okay, so we're talking about a capital crime now. We're not just talking about a guy who ran off with a woman. We're talking about, so what he's asking now is, he's accusing him of giving her drugs, and that's how he's able to marry her. That's why she married him. If he's found guilty, he'll be tortured, made to confess, and then he'll be executed or be killed. Outside of that, there's not a hell of a lot happening here. It's no big deal. He's not going to go to jail. He's not going to, well, he'll go to jail and wait trial, of course. But we're dealing with a capital crime now. We must be aware of that. There's a lot on the line here. Otherwise, what happens with this scene is that they're talking about a war in terms of the country being in danger, and this guy comes in with all due respect to who he is, and is talking about his daughter. Well, okay, it's important, but there's a place, there's a time for that. Not now. So let's resolve this, and then we'll take care of your daughter. Of course, the fact is they're tied together, the two. But the point I'm getting at is it has to be treated with gravity by the others. It really is a serious offense, as far as the Duke is concerned and the others. They don't lose priorities, though. At no time do they ever think it's more important than what's happening in terms of the war. But there is a respect and a gravity for the problem he brings in here. Otherwise, it seems ludicrous. It's like, why are they even getting into this? And so he's taken aback, the Duke. And in his next speech, we see his response. Okay, that's a major area, that line. She is abused, stolen from me, and corrupted by spells and medicines or mountebanks. It's a major area for the others outside of Othello. I'm talking about the Duke, senators, who discovered this at that moment. Okay, let's continue into the Duke's response.
Whoe'er he be that in this foul proceeding hath thus beguiled your daughter of herself, and you of her, the bloody book of lore you shall yourself read, in the bitter letter, after your own sense. Yea, though our proper son stood in your action.
Humbly, I thank your grace. Here is the man, this Moor, whom now it seems your special mandate for the state affairs hath hither brought.
Okay, hold on a second. He says, you shall yourself read in the bitter letter after your own sense. Change own to its. If it's own, and it could be either one, if it's own, then it's like you will make the law. Whatever you want in terms of the law, you will get. If it's you will read what the law says in terms of a crime like this. And
I'm lost on it.
After its sense, you want it?
After
yeah,
it's
in other words, after its own sense. Instead of after your own sense.
So that would just
I
be,
don't
I
know.
thought that would just be
Line
respect, though. Since you are the Duke, you are essentially one of the makers of the laws.
Absolutely.
acquiesce to you, you are the law.
After
It could work too.
After
It could work. It can work either way.
Change your own.
I don't object to the other reading.
Okay.
I'm going back and
Exactly.
forth on that. I'm telling you the other one because the other one is very good, and either one could work. But also, what it'll do is it'll illuminate what's happening there even more, just by being aware of the alternative. Even if you don't end up using it, just by talking about it, we see exactly what's happening here. So in the first case, he's saying, you will read exactly like you said. It's hyperbole, obviously, because in no way is he, under any conditions, he can allow him to read the law according to his view of the law. That's not law, that's anarchy. And they had a good law system there, as a matter of fact, so that's very important. On the other hand, the way I'm treating it is more objectively in terms of the reality of the law there, the fact that the law was very stable and according to the books, and they had a great system there.
After its own sense?
After its own, in other words, after what it says, whatever the punishment is for this crime, you will read that punishment to the person who's guilty. You will be the one to pass sentence based on what is proper. Then he says, yea, though our proper son stood in your action, and highlight proper son. So you can use a substitute there just to get comfortable. Yea, though our own son. And as I said before, there are times when without the substitute, at first, you won't get the color that's needed. Proper is not a word we would use today in a situation like this. It's alien. But, yea, though our own son stood in your action. Yea, though our proper son. You can say proper 40 times, but it's still going to be proper and it still doesn't have that color. But say it enough the other way, and until the two become one, and then you've got the line. You've got the color. Otherwise, you're highlighting proper because you know you're supposed to, and so on.
Excuse me.
Sure.
Just a question about the change of your to its.
Mm-hmm.
If they were indeed going to go by the letter of the law, wouldn't that be redundant to say after its own sense? Why would you need to interpret what it said unless you were going to do it according to your own feelings?
No, not according to his after its own sense,
No,
being what the law
what
is.
I'm saying is,
Yeah.
why is that not redundant the way we're doing it now? He says you shall yourself read in the bitter letter after its own sense. Why would you read, if it were simply going to be stated and done, whatever the law was, why would he have to add that line after its own sense? After your own sense makes sense because he is saying according to your own interpretation. Why would they have bothered to translate according to your own interpretation if it wasn't meant to be a color to show in the scene how desperately terrible
Yes.
the concept was to these men, that this woman was drugged and accosted and kidnapped? Wouldn't it make more sense, actually?
It could. As I said to Mark, no, you're absolutely right. As I said to Mark, it can be either one. One reason that I'm substituting that now is I want to make you more aware of what's happening there in terms of the ramifications of it. But I am not set on that reading. Okay, it's an optional.
I just don't understand.
Reading.
What
We're just saying is
say after its own sense. That doesn't make sense. After your own sense makes sense. If the word after means according to.
if it's after your own sense, then it's how you interpret the law.
I know.
If it's after its own sense, then of course it's after what the law would say for a crime like this. I don't know if that's helpful.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Not to belabor it, I could almost get a whole different reading with the your own sense.
Yeah.
In that, to me, when I was reading it the other day, it felt like it was like it tied into Brabantio's first thing, like if all of this, what you're saying, is true, it's like it's almost your own sense goes off. Like if what you're saying is true when you come in here, then we're going to follow the letter of the law. If that is true, like after your own sense. So in other words, like you shall yourself read in the bitter letter after
Your own judgment.
your own judgment.
evaluation.
If what you say is true, then definitely we're going to follow the
You
letter.
will pass judgment. You will read in the whatever the judge according to how you evaluate it, not according to how the law evaluates it. You know what I'm saying? Because he will make the evaluation. He will decide according to his own emotional response. Yeah. Now there's a validity there because if we do it that way, it makes it like Mark said, it's a certain human color. It's an exaggeration. It is an exaggeration.
It also feels like there's an option in the law. It almost feels like there's the law might say capital punishment or what blah 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 blah, and then he could take whichever, you know. I mean, I don't know what the law was, but like if there was some option.
For this, it would be, except for extenuating circumstances, it would be a capital. It's a
So
capital.
there's no option for punishment like be a ban or what do they call it?
Well, the Duke could step in and make an exception, of course, or Brabantio could say, okay, he's found guilty, now just keep him in prison. In other words, you don't have to kill him. I made my point, which is not what you necessarily do,
right?
But Artemis, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I think the Bloody Book of Law is about what it's written, and I think the bitter letter, after its own sense, or its own sense could mean like a precedent, like somewhat an interpretation, but not so much a personal interpretation, but more a general interpretation of what someone would judge, what a judge's decision.
In other words, a fair decision. In other words, he'll read the sentence, but the sentence will be based on its own sense, on what the law is. But he will pass it. You know what I'm saying? So, in other words, it'll be fair. It'll be fair, but he'll pass the sentence.
Well, but it may be that this particular crime hasn't been committed before, and that in that case they would have to compare it with other like cases that wouldn't be exactly the same, and therefore they have to look for other ways of how to interpret the law.
Yeah, extenuating circumstances and whatever. Sure. Yeah.
I just, not to belabor the point as you said, but I just think if we do that in Shakespeare's work, if we change a word like yours, it totally changes the meaning.
I haven't changed it. No, I've gone to the court though, that's all.
But we're passing judgment on his decision that this man was going to give Brabantio the right to judge this man according to his own interpretation. Now he no longer has that right.
That's right, yeah. Oh, no, understand that the word that I'm choosing, where I mentioned there's some alternatives, are alternative readings. They're not something I arbitrarily chose. In other words,
so that you've read it in other.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And it's debated. These are areas that are highly debated. You'll go, if you get 8 scripts, you'll get 3 or 4 will have one and 3 or 4 another. No, I never.
Much different,
No. I don't put words in. I just don't put words in, no. And that goes for the others too, where I made a change in a couple of, I think we did 3 or 4. There are actually some others I like, but it's not that important right now. But never substituting a word just because, no.
Okay, thank you.
And it's not always the quarto, often it's the fuller. Understand that all these scripts are, with rare exception, are taken from both sources, sometimes from 3 or 4 sources. The first folio, the second folio, the third, the first quarto, the second, and they argue about it ad femenam ad nauseam, and certain lines, in some cases, it's better just to take a line out. And we're getting to a line in this scene, which we're going to take out, which we can do it. I mean, we'll keep it in, we'll take it out, whatever. But the point I'm getting at is some of these lines are so belabored, and it's just, you take them out, it means nothing. The point's been made anyway, and you go on with it. Yea, though our proper son. So in other words, even if my son was accused of this offense, he would pay the price, whatever you think it is. So it ends on a very high note. Well, it isn't over yet. Okay, let's just go back a little bit. Let's go back to the opening, because that is a little bit.
Valiant Othello, we must straight implore you against the general enemy Othello. I did not see you. Welcome, gentle Signor. We lacked your counsel and your help tonight.
So did I yours. Good your grace, pardon me. Neither my place nor aught I heard of business hath raised me from my bed, nor doth the general care take hold on me. For my particular grief is of so floodgate and o'erbearing nature that it engluts and swallows other sorrows, and yet is still itself.
Why? What's the matter?
My daughter, Oh, my daughter.
Dead?
To me. She is abused, stolen from me, and corrupted by spells and medicines bought of mountebanks. Is that the pronunciation? For nature so preposterously to err, being not deficient, blind, or lame of sense, sans witchcraft could not.
Sans witchcraft.
Sans witchcraft could not.
Whoe'er he be that.
Okay, excuse me a second. Now, on that last line, sans witchcraft could not. Could not has to be highlighted. Otherwise, it's without witchcraft could not.
Right.
Without witchcraft could not.
Yeah.
And again, there are other readings, but I'm not going to get into all of them now. There are other alternatives. Okay, let's continue with the Duke.
Whoe'er he be that in this foul proceeding hath thus beguiled your daughter of herself, and you of her, the bloody book of law you shall yourself read in this bitter letter after its own sense. Yea, though our own son stood in your action.
Humbly, I thank your grace. Here is the man, this Moor, who now, it seems, your special mandate for the state affairs hath hither brought.
Okay, exactly. Humbly I thank your grace. Here is the man, and then isolate that just the way you did. This more. And then, whom now it seems, so there's a break before that and a slight break after, just to highlight that. So when I talk about breaks, not to confuse you, not to think there's a huge stop there. It may not even be a stop, but an emotional stop.
Mm-hmm.
But now we have to mark it. There's no other way. And then we see. Okay, now this whole area, after they come in this early part, it builds and builds and builds. And the Duke is right there, okay? After your own, yea, though our proper son stood in your, yea, though our proper son stood in your action. And Brabantio tops him. Humbly, I thank your grace. Oh, wonderful. And he continues. Here is the man, this more. And then, now it seems a special mandate for the state affairs that fit abroad. Okay, now what happens? Well, usually what happens is we go to the next line. We are sorry for it, and what in your own, and then the Duke says, he may have both lines, whatever. Let's say the first senator, we are sorry, very sorry for it. What in your own part can we say to this? He said, okay, now, there's got to be a pause here. And it's got to be a pause of, my God, the one thing we don't need is this.